Ever wondered what nightlife was like in the Middle Ages? Forget what you think you know. We're about to pull back the curtain on a world far more complex and fascinating than the dusty history books suggest. This isn't just about shadowy alleys and whispered secrets. This is a story of music, business, survival, and the surprising role of women in shaping medieval cities. Welcome to the hidden world of medieval entertainment houses. Let's rewind to the 10th century. Europe is waking up. Towns are sprouting, trade routes are buzzing, and cities are becoming vibrant hubs of activity. With all this growth came a new kind of demand, not just for goods, but for social connection. Imagine a merchant, a craftsman, or a traveler, far from home, looking for a warm meal, a friendly conversation, and a bit of music to unwind. This is where our story begins. In the bustling new urban centers, small establishments started to appear. These weren't grand halls, but often just simple huts or rooms. Here, you could find food, a drink, and perhaps some music or storytelling. And who ran these places? Often, it was women. For some, it was a way to earn a living, to gain a slice of independence in a world that offered them few options, or simply to support their families. For the men who visited, these houses were a sanctuary, a place to relax, connect, and escape the daily grind. It was less about sin and more about society. But as these establishments grew more common, the authorities started to take notice. By the 12th century, city councils and even kings realized that trying to stamp them out was futile. Instead, they did something remarkably pragmatic. They decided to regulate them. Cities like Paris, London, and Cologne began issuing licenses and collecting taxes. Suddenly, these houses weren't just informal gathering spots. They were recognized and, in a way, legitimate parts of the urban economy. Now, you might be wondering, what did the church think about all this? Officially, they condemned it, but in reality, their stance was often one of reluctant tolerance. The logic was simple. It was better to have these activities contained in a regulated space than to have disorder spill out onto the streets. It was seen as a necessary evil to protect the honor of other women in the city. This regulation had a huge impact. For women working in these houses, it sometimes meant legal protection and a recognized status, even if a social stigma remained. They were now part of a system, not just operating in the shadows. For the men, it meant having a safe and regulated place to go. They could seek companionship without fearing they were breaking the law. It was a classic medieval compromise, balancing morality with the practical needs of a growing city. So, what was it really like inside one of these houses in the 14th or 15th century? Forget the grim, dark images you might have in your head. Picture a lively tavern filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and spirited debate. These were cultural hubs. The main attractions weren't just about intimacy, they were about entertainment. Singing, storytelling, poetry recitals, and dancing were central to the experience. The women who worked here were often multi-talented entertainers. They developed skills in music, performance, and conversation. It was a space where they could express themselves artistically and build social networks. The men who came weren't just looking for a fleeting encounter. They were seeking a rich cultural experience, intellectual conversation, and a memorable evening of leisure. In some cities, the women were even required to wear distinctive clothing like a special hat or a striped hood, marking them as part of this regulated trade. A visible sign of their unique place in the city is social fabric. As society evolved, so did the nature of companionship. Especially in Renaissance Italy, a new kind of figure emerged: the courtesan. These weren't just entertainers, they were cultural powerhouses. The courtigian honest, or honest courtesans, were celebrated for their intelligence, wit, and artistic talents. They offered sophisticated companionship, engaging powerful men in conversations about philosophy, art, and politics. They were poets, musicians, and trendsetters. Beyond the cities, women might act as respectable companions at fairs or feasts, offering temporary partnerships that were more about social grace than anything else. Some even found their way into noble courts as performers, musicians, dancers, and storytellers, blurring the lines between artist and companion. For these women, particularly the famous courtesans of Venice, this life could lead to incredible status, education, and influence. For the men in their orbit, association with such a woman brought cultural refinement and social prestige. Of course, this life was not without its dangers. Despite any legal recognition, a powerful social stigma was always present. Life was precarious, earnings could fluctuate wildly, and many women were entirely dependent on their work for survival. And in an age before modern medicine, crowded public spaces were breeding grounds for illness. During outbreaks of the plague, these houses were often among the first places to be shut down. For the women, it was a life lived on a knife's edge, physically demanding and socially risky. But for some, it was the only path to independence. Even the men who visited risked their reputations if they were seen as spending too much time or money in these establishments. History has left us some fascinating anecdotes from this time. In London, some of the most famous entertainment houses in the district of Southwark were actually owned by the Bishop of Winchester. This led to the women working there being nicknamed the Winchester Geese. It's a striking example of the complicated relationship between the church and the realities of medieval life. Meanwhile, in Avignon, the city that housed the popes for much of the 14th century, the church openly tolerated a large regulated district for decades, again choosing pragmatism over moral absolutism. And in Venice, celebrated courtesans like Veronica Franco became cultural icons, their lives and poetry inspiring art and literature that we still admire today. These stories show us that these establishments weren't on the fringes of society. They were deeply woven into the economic, cultural, and political life of the city. But by the 16th century, the world was changing again. The Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation ushered in a new era of stricter moral codes. Across Europe, authorities began to crack down. Public health concerns from recurring plagues also led to more frequent closures. The freewheeling, semi-accepted world of the medieval entertainment house was coming to an end. But it didn't just disappear, it transformed. Some houses evolved into different kinds of venues: theaters, music halls, and taverns that emphasized performance and social gathering over paid companionship. The women who had once found a life there had to adapt. Some left the profession entirely. The famous courtesans of Venice either reinvented themselves as performers or used their influence to marry into respectable society. For men, the social scene shifted to these new public spaces, and the nature of urban nightlife changed forever. So what is the legacy of this hidden world? It's all around us. The very term, red light district, is thought to originate from the red lanterns that were sometimes used to mark these houses. The art, music, and literature of the Renaissance are filled with the influence of the courtesans and companions who defined urban culture. Today, historians see these establishments not as simple dens of vice, but as complex and important social institutions. They offer a unique window into medieval urban life, telling us so much about gender, the economy, and the intricate social networks of the past. They show us a world where survival, business, and art were intertwined in ways we're only just beginning to understand. The story of medieval entertainment houses is a reminder that history is never black and white, but always full of vibrant, surprising, and deeply human shades of gray. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments what piece of medieval life you'd like to explore next. See you soon.